You're listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. She is passionate, direct, and sometimes a little sarcastic, but always gives you what you need to succeed in business. Now, here's your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 10, Defeating Your Inability to Focus with Erik Fisher. If you're an entrepreneur who wants to take consistent, massive, focused action in your business and life, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. I'm excited about this episode because you're going to meet my guest, Erik. Erik Fisher is a podcaster on productivity, producing for over 4 years Beyond the To-Do List podcast, where he talks with real people who practically implement productivity strategies in their professional and personal lives. Erik has been with Social Media Examiner for 3 years, where he serves as a social media manager. When listening in on my conversation with Erik, you will discover techniques to maintain focus on the task at hand, what you're unknowingly doing that causes your inability to focus, how your circadian rhythms affect your work, old and new technologies to promote focus, and so much more. So let's dive right in and meet Erik. Hello and welcome to Productivity Straight Talk, Erik. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me.
You know, I always open my shows off and I love sharing why I invited someone to my podcast. And I've got to say, I think I invited you because you spell your name the same way as my son with a K. That's not that common. No, I'm just joking. I've seen it and I recognize it. And my son's always happy when he can see someone that spells their name the same way. So E-R-I-K. So Erik, you are going to talk to us all about your book, Focus Booster, and the importance of focus and how focus can help our productivity. But before we jump into focus, I want my listeners just to know a little bit about you. How did you become a productivity expert? What's your story? And how did you become one of the most well-known productivity podcast hosts?
Well, first and foremost, I had been podcasting for years, probably 4 to 5 years prior to launching my Beyond the To-Do List podcast. And so I had been co-hosting. I'd never done a solo show before. In fact, I've really never still done technically a solo show other than when it's just me talking. But I had done a lot of podcasting. I really enjoyed doing that. And the other key piece was I was so much involved with social media and productivity that I just thought, well, it made sense that I translate that over into a podcast for myself where I got to talk to people and learn from them. So that was kind of the hidden secret
agenda.
There. Yeah, the hidden agenda was, how can I get to talk to productivity experts and friends that I can learn from and have it be almost like free coaching, So
right, that's a great spin on it.
Yeah, so and that's technically what it has been. It's not that I've not been, an expert per se. Even the experts know. In fact, who was it that was telling me this? Somebody recently was saying, even fancy chefs order pizza. Even,
from Domino's, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because, and it may be a little bit different for us productivity people because it's this quote unquote lifestyle of productivity that we're kind of putting out there. But come on, you got to let some stuff slide. So anyway.
Either on accident or on purpose, but things slide for all of us, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. It's almost like shifting tectonic plates. Like earthquakes happen. Stuff doesn't stay the same forever. We sold our house months ago and have been renting, and now we're buying a new place. And my workspace at home changed 2 or 3 different times throughout that whole process, and I had to work through that, and literally and figuratively. And
right.
So, it's never the same. One size doesn't fit all. There's no silver bullet. Even productivity experts can forget things or get sloppy here and there because, again, life is life. Life happens. And ideally, yes, you get better as you go. And I think that I am. So
I didn't realize you had moved your office a few times in the last few months, but that can always be feeling productive, right? You got to get your space set up. You don't really know what your groove is. So I'm glad you're pushing through that. And I think everyone that's listening can really appreciate that, whether it's a sickness or a family thing or a move. There's a lot of things that kind of disrupt our flow and we got to get back on track.
Definitely.
So I want to ask you, I often speak with my clients how they're screwing their productivity without, necessarily knowing it. And I want you to think back and let our listeners know one way that you may have been screwing your productivity in the past.
Well, I can give you for sure an answer to that one, because I think that one of the biggest things I ever did was say yes to a project that I did not fully understand the scope of. And so it ended up lasting months longer than I ever understood that it should have. And so for the pay that I was getting for it, and for the amount of time it was on my mind, and forefront of my mind and subconscious mind, stressing me out. And then finally, once I realized what it was, I was like, oh, well, this is all I need to do this. Let me start knocking it out. It didn't get done immediately, but I started getting it done faster and more progress on it. So ultimately, the lesson is one, if you're going to, try to say no to everything. First and foremost, because
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Say no to everything and then yes to just a couple things,
Yes.
right?
Yes, exactly. Because I can look back at that season and I can say that was one of probably the most stressful periods in my life. And yes, I learned from that experience, and especially when the project was immediately over. Like, it felt like I was on vacation, even though everything else was still normal in my life, like day job and doing a podcast and having a family. Like, suddenly it was like, oh, I can breathe again, And so, yeah, you got to say no to almost everything and then say yes to the most important stuff.
That's awesome advice, and thanks for sharing that story. Before we go any further, I want to make sure my listeners stop screwing their productivity. Want to reduce your stress? How about grow your business? Wish you had more time for family, friends, hobbies, and everything else you enjoy? Think you can't have all three? You're wrong. You just need to stop screwing your productivity. Text SCREW to 444999 to receive your free copy of 10 Ways You're Screwing Your Productivity. Or you can download your free copy at theproductivityspecialist.com/screw. SCREW. Awesome, Erik. Now let's get back to Straight Talk with Erik Fisher. We're going to be talking about one of his books. He's got two books. One is Ready, Aim, Fire, Setting and Achieving Goals. And his second book is Focus Booster, Have More Clarity, Make Better Decisions, and Live a Better Life. Now, if that's not a catchy title that I think everybody's like, yes, give me some of that, I can't even imagine. So I want to talk to you about, why did you write the book? How does that intersect with your version of what you believe productivity is?
Sure. Well, again, I believe that productivity is not just about getting the right things done. It's not even about getting the right things done as much as it is getting done. My philosophy is very much like yours, as I know, which is, look, we want to feel competent, we want to feel confident, and we want to know that what we've said we are going to do, we have done. And hopefully we've taken the time to sit down and choose the right things to do. Other than that, again, I want to be able to breathe. This is one of those like going back to, how I was screwing my productivity. I said yes to something I probably should have never said yes to, or should have been much more on top of right at the front of the gate when it was starting, to have gotten it done months faster or sooner than I did. And I learned that lesson the hard way. So it comes down to, suddenly it's like, wait a second. Well, if I could manage working on that project and getting a podcast out and having a family and having a day job, then that means I could either operate on that peak level, which, burned me out a bit, or like it would most people, or
right.
I can have a healthier balance. And now that project is done and out of my life, I can operate with a much better understanding and awareness of what I am capable of. Even if, even if I need to burn the midnight oil or burn the candle at both ends and all those other metaphors that get thrown around, at least you can do it for a quick sprint. Like, do it for a day, do it for a week, but you start doing that for a month or many months at a time, and you will have serious health issues. So,
and I can attest to that. I actually got myself very, very sick in around October, November. And prior to that, Actually, when it hit me, I only had myself to look in the mirror and say, oh my gosh, I had this huge project myself I was working on. I had this huge immediate opportunity that fell in my lap that I was like, I'm not going to let pass by. But to that point, I was working around the clock. And I'm like, this is just for a short little time. And then dang it, that carrot got moved down the road. I'm like, just a little bit longer. And the carrot got moved. And then bam, I was sick. And when I got sick, I was like, wow, if I'm not going to listen to myself, my body is going to scream. And it did. And I had no one to blame but myself in the situation that I was at. I wore my body out. And I think that's awesome that you and I have similar stories, but that's the only thing that's awesome about that is that other people can learn from that and recognize that maybe if that's been happening to them, this is why. Like, you cannot go at those speeds all the time.
No, totally. I mean, I was getting up before the kids were up and working on stuff, then getting them out the door and my wife out the door. And then I would do day job stuff all day. And then would, after the kids were asleep, hit it again. And then on the weekends, some too. And it just, again, having focus was an imperative because I had to put my noise canceling headphones on. I had to get in my workspace that kind of cued me into, okay, I'm working now. I had to turn up my focus at will. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's the
only because I've heard
music.
You talk about it, so I've looked into that. Yeah. So tell our listeners briefly what that is real quick.
Sure. Yeah, so Focus at Will is a service that I am a lifetime member to because that's how much I believe in it. And it is music and or sound compositions that are created to flow from one to another so you can listen to it for long periods of time. And what it does is it is designed acoustically, symphonically, however scientifically, to kill the fight or flight mechanism in your brain. So if you're sitting there for 20 minutes or an hour and a half, and you want to push a project or a specific task, like if you want to clear out, if you want to process your emails, you listen, you put this in, you listen, and it will, almost like a horse with blinders so it can't see to the left or the right, it will focus you, and it really does work. So
wow, I'm going to have to give that a try. I think that myself, and obviously you have a passion for focus because you wrote the book, we're always looking for that focus. That time when you're working on a project and a bomb could go off and nothing's going to distract you. You're just in that zone. I almost fiend for that zone, and I want to replicate that zone as often as possible because it feels like it doesn't feel like you do. You get so much work done and productive work. You're just focusing straight through a project instead of, get sidetracked by a chime or a ring or an email or somebody walking by your desk. And so I love that this Focus at Will isn't an app, or I guess you can listen to it on your computer as well, right?
Yeah, so it's a website, and you subscribe to it, and there are free trial stuff, so you can test it out, see if it works for you first. But excuse me. You can do the free trial, and there are also the web apps, so you can download the app for your phones and access it that way. So that's another cool thing is you could have it turned on your phone and then have your phone in do not disturb mode, and then your phone is what's giving you the music, and then you don't have to listen to the sounds coming from your computer, so you're even less likely to have a ding or a ping or other things that distract you.
That's awesome. So I read parts of your book, I read the book, but I have parts of it highlighted. That's what I rather said. I have parts of it highlighted that had stuck out to me that were really kind of ahas of the way that you wrote them. And one of them said, when you have low energy, this negatively affects your level of focus and you're not as effective with your time. And it seemed like, yeah, okay, I know that. When I'm tired, I can't focus. But you go on to explain it's kind of our job to keep our energy levels at a certain level so that we can focus, right? Better exercise, eating right, more sleep. I think that's really beneficial to our listeners is the whole idea of focus is from different ways. So you're talking about music in an app. We're talking about eating healthy, sleeping more. Which when you're talking to people with no time, they're like, yeah, right, Eric, thanks for that tip. But how do I sleep more? And how do I, carve in time to exercise? And I think what you're saying is when you do that, you may feel like you're not out of time as often.
I've been thinking a lot about this lately. In fact, coming a while off of that, again, that whole lesson, the big lesson in my life lately, I realized that one, I wasn't hydrating myself nearly enough. And so I was craving things that were the snacks and the coffee and the things that were supposed to be a quick pick-me-up, but then I was crashing so much further down than where I was at the point of the craving. And so what I've done is I've kind of instituted, I have this water bottle. It's like 25 ounces, and I'll drink one first thing in the morning, like the entire thing. First thing I get up, that's what I do. Because you've just gone 8 hours without drinking anything. So your body's dehydrated. So you fix that problem first off to at least get started. I drink another one before lunch throughout the morning with just sipping it. And then another one between after lunch and like dinner. And then I stop. Depending upon your body, that's good enough for you. I don't like to drink too much past that point because then I realize it's waking me up in the middle of the night and then I'm losing sleep. So hydration is one of the things that I've found is just, oh my gosh, like it takes away my headaches. Like if I've got, instead of popping pills, like it's because you're dehydrated. It's not because you have, I mean, it might be, it's stress-induced headaches and things like that. But half the time it's because you're running on empty, like physically, not just hydration-wise, but nutritionally. So that's the other thing is I try to keep, in fact, I'm looking at it right now. My bag is sitting here and I've got a Ziploc bag with like it's like trail mix. It's got peanuts and sunflower seeds and cranberries and raisins and stuff like that. That's like it's actual food. It's not like sugar or something that's going to crash and burn. And I parse that out throughout the day. So like, and again, sometimes you're working so much you forget to have lunch and if you haven't scheduled it on your calendar. But yeah, and then sleep is huge. Like you end up acting drunk with not enough sleep. Scientifically proven. I don't have the stat right in front of me to like tell you that, but like I've had sleep people on my show and they have said you are effectively operating machinery.
Like you're drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I've heard that as well too. And I think you're right. Like the energy level with food, fueling our body with fuel and water. And we know that. And yet sometimes the habit is wake up, have a cup of coffee and plow right through work. And, oh, what was lunch? And then why do we crash and burn? And so those are really good habits you're implementing to keep your focus and energy levels up.
Yeah. And I'm not saying don't have coffee, but what I am saying is
I'm glad you're going down in the records by saying don't not have coffee.
Trust me. But I will say this, like sometimes that coffee, if you're in a panic mode about getting stuff done and you add caffeine to the mix, you're just making your heart beat faster. You're not necessarily making yourself more effective. So keep that in mind. Have it in small doses. Like maybe get that 1 cup, but sip it across the afternoon, alternating still sipping and drinking your water. Then you'll see the benefits of both.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So ideally, if we read your book and we implemented all the items you have in your book about focus, what's the benefit of focus? So if we were a good student of your book and now we have focus, how does that intersect with productivity? What does focus mean to you?
Well, focus purely to me means that whatever I am saying my attention is going to be set on, that's where it's set on. In other words, wherever I am, be there. Mm-hmm, I heard that from a professor of mine in college, and it struck me. I'm like, well, right now I'm sitting in your class. So obviously you're saying be here in the class right now. But it just keeps coming back to me that like we have such a fragmented attention span these days where I'm talking to you, and if I wasn't focusing talking to you, I'd have my phone in my hand, I'd be looking at my watch, I'd be staring at my laptop here, I'd have email open. Like that's not effective. That's doing none of that's doing none of those things well. And so it's focus is a lot more than just not multitasking. It's actually single tasking super effectively. It's having your full attention, your full capacity and intelligence focused in on the thing you're doing right now. Because 1, you'll do it better. And 2, you'll do it faster. Now, you won't always do it faster, but I bet you will if you're focusing.
Oh, right. Absolutely. So what is your ideal time frame to focus? You know, some people are like, you know what? I'm 90 minutes. I can go 90 minutes. And I have other clients that are looking at me like I have a third eye, 90 minutes on the same thing with no interruptions. Like I can't do that. So are you more closer to like the 20 minutes or 90 minutes? What works for you?
I'm on the lower end of the spectrum just because I have attention deficit something or other disorder. Anyway, I was diagnosed like 10 years ago, and I don't take drugs or anything for it. I lean on productivity for that. For me, it's on the lower end. For me, it's healthy for me to say, here's this small piece. And again, it's going to depend on the activity or the project, because if you can't, in other words, to have forward momentum, if the project dictates that you've got to sit there and really think something through and push it all the way through, then it may take 30 minutes. It may take 40 minutes. It may take an hour. But I will ideally decide what it is I'm going to be doing, and then say, okay, how can I chunk this down into smaller pieces? And how can I'm going to spend 20 minutes and make sure I get this one piece done. Then when that's done, I reward myself by getting up, walking around, maybe step outside and get some air, come back in. But I will, before I have left, known what the next thing is that I'm going to come back in and then do for another 20 minutes. And I'm describing the Pomodoro method, sort of.
Yeah, so. You are. And I love that you just said before you leave, like you come back, you already know what you're intentionally going to be doing. So you're not wasting time trying to figure out like, oh, I'm back. Now what am I going to do? You're getting right into it. You have an intention.
Yeah, because so many times we end up spending 20 minutes at a time over and over and over again, or an hour at a time working on something. But again, the goal here is not to get a lot of it done. The goal is to complete it. And that's what we want to have in mind as we're doing these intervals of work on that task or project.
I think that's excellent. For focus, for me, I find that I can focus obviously earlier in the morning. For me, that works. But I'm a believer, and I believe you are too, is that we all have to do what works for us. Some people can focus better in the late afternoon. Some, like our friend, Mike Vardy, like he's a night owl, right? So he can focus in the middle of the night like no other, that we are honoring finding out what works best for each of us and going with that, with our natural rhythms and our natural personality.
Totally. Yeah, I am definitely not like Mike. I am better in the morning. I would like to get a ton of stuff done in the morning, first thing, as well as, before lunch, because I just find as the day goes on, for me personally, and everybody's different, my rhythm, my circadian rhythm especially, is that I will start to have lower energy. Even when I am doing all the right things, I will still have lower energy as the day goes on. And that's just the way it is. And so I don't try to do single focusing task intensive stuff in the afternoon. Like that's when I will typically say, hey, let's have a meeting. And then the energy's not all required to come from me. I can bounce off other people.
Oh my gosh, you just took the words out of my mouth. That was the example I was going to give. When at all possible, I make my appointments or meetings with people after lunch because I get a lot of energy interacting with people. So if I'm lower on energy, just the fact that I'm interacting with someone else, I can be at a top game versus if I had to do a task like writing something, creating something that took my single focus, I generally can't do that in the afternoons. And so I work my schedule to work with that, knowing that I get energy from other people. So exactly what you were saying.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, all right. So where can they find your books, Ready, Aim, Fire, as well as Focus Booster?
Sure. Well, what you can do is you can go to beyondthetodolist.com, which is also where my podcast is. And right there on the sidebar in big, bold, colorful imagery, you can click those and those take you right to Amazon where you can get those.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And you know what? They're great reads. I have read Focus Booster. I have Ready, Aim, Fire already purchased, and I'll be reading that as well. And I'm sure it's got some great information. As you said, Erik, you are just a wealth of knowledge about productivity because you're as you kind of said, like you're a constant learner, you're a student. You're not only a teacher for us today and my audience, which I really appreciate, but you're always learning about this and figuring out what works and doesn't work for yourself. Before we leave, I have one last thing. I want to know, this is something I help my clients with. I help them take consistent, massive, focused action in their business. And I'd like you to share one tip in where you take consistent action in your business that you reap the benefits of. It helps you achieve your goals.
Sure. Well, interestingly enough, I actually just recently did something called a productivity pub crawl. And what that is you switch locations, especially if you're with more than one person, and you as a group start at one place, move to the next place, and so on throughout the day. And I kind of walk through that in a really recent episode with a friend of mine who did that with me.
I will definitely link to it in the show notes. I will get that from you.
So it's got a lot of benefits to it, to where you are focusing and you are shaking it up, and you're reaping the benefits of having kind of a water cooler time with friends or even family. Like you could have one of your kids come with you and do homework. So.
Okay, so we're going to hear all about it in your podcast episode, because I'm still what is that?
Yeah.
And it sounds very, very intriguing. So I can't wait to hear all about that as well. And I was also recently on your podcast as well. And so we'll also link out to that in the show notes. Erik Fisher, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge that you've gotten over the years with our listeners. And I look forward to chatting all about productivity with you very soon again.
Yeah, thank you, Amber, for having me. This was great.
Wow, wasn't that great having Erik Fisher share some of his knowledge that he's gained over the 4 years of hosting Beyond the To-Do List? I'm honored to have him, and I'm so glad you were able to listen in on our conversation. Now, while I've loved having you listen to Productivity Straight Talk, I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So based on what you learned today, what is the one thing that you are going to take action on today? Out of everything that you heard from my conversation with Erik Fisher, what was the one thing that intrigued you that you think that if implemented would make the biggest impact in your life and your business? Well, commit today. Commit today to take that one action. And you can commit publicly for some accountability in my productivity community. So to share your actionables and receive support, guidance, and motivation from entrepreneurs just like you, join us inside Productivity Straight Talk private community. You can join for free by going to productivitycommunity.com. Again, you can join us on the inside for free at productivitycommunity.com. So that's my straight talk for you today. I look forward to next week when we get to talk again, and until then, make it a productive week.